good morning, everyone. I hope you're all keeping pretty good out there. Got a bit of a downpour going on outside right now. Sounds kind of nice to hear the rain. Be rain and not snow, but I hope it doesn't get to be too much flooding. Anyway, it's the third Sunday of Lent, and oddly, the topic for the day is thirst. We'll be looking at the book of Exodus. This in the 17th chapter, and the Israelites are thirsty. Moses, and say the Lord, has brought them to a place where they're in the middle of nowhere, in a desert wilderness, and they need water, and it's serious. And just to let you know kind of where they've been so far, of course, God delivered them from slavery there in Egypt from Pharaoh. Brought them to the Red Sea, parted the Red Sea. They crossed over, and God, of course, destroyed Pharaoh's army with the water collapsing back. And then they went to a place where there was no water, or actually there was water, except they couldn't drink it. And Moses did a little, shouldn't say magic trick, but kind of what it boils down to in ancient ideas, and he threw a log into the water and made it good to drink. Then they left there and went on a little bit further, and they had run out of food. So God sent them quail, so much quail that it made them sick. And of course they were complaining about being hungry and wanted to go back to Egypt, and because there are plenty of onions and cucumbers back there. But the complaining was more geared toward they thought the gods of Egypt would do, who were the agricultural gods back there, could look after them better than this God who was apparently a god of war. Anyway, so they eat their fill for a while, and they're getting manna every day, and now here finally they've come to a spot where they're just in the middle of nowhere and there's no water. So that's where we'll pick up our reading. It's Exodus chapter 17, the first 7 verses. From the wilderness of Sin, the whole congregation of the Israelites journeyed by stages, as the Lord commanded. They camped at Rephidim, but there was no water for the people to drink. The people quarreled with Moses and said, "Give us water to drink." And Moses said to them, "Why do you quarrel with me? Why do you test the Lord?" But the people thirsted there for water. And the people complained against Moses and said, "Why did you bring us out of Egypt to kill us and our children and our livestock with thirst?" So Moses cried out to the Lord, "What shall I do with this people? They are almost ready to stone me." And the Lord said to Moses, "Go on ahead of the people and take some of the elders of Israel with you. Take in your hand the staff with which you struck the Nile, and go. I will be standing there in front of you on the rock at Horeb. Strike the rock, and the water will come out of it, so that the people may drink." Moses did so in the sight of the elders of Israel. He called the place Massah and Meribah, because the Israelites quarreled and tested the Lord, saying, "Is the Lord among us or not?" Word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Well, a long time ago, I guess it would have been probably 1994, 95, 96, somewhere in there, when I was in seminary, my first wife and I decided we would like to graduate from campground camping. We drive the car somewhere and set up and camp there, and it's all safe and whatever. We wanted to try to graduate into backcountry camping. This was something I'd done quite a bit of back when I was young and in the Scouts. So it wasn't a completely foreign experience to me, but for my wife, well, she would have to trust me. So we acquired what extra gear we would need to backpack into a place and camp. Well, for our first and only attempt, we chose a side trail down in Virginia, just off the Appalachian Trail in the George Washington National Forest in Virginia. It's not far from where we were from. The trail, you took a Forestry Service road, walked along it, and then you dropped over the side, and it descended kind of a meandering way down into level ground at the bottom where there was good camping. But coming out, things get a little bit different because there's a 1,600-foot climb to get out, and with the scenic view of a waterfall along the way. We thought this would be a nice place to go for our first experience. The trail book said that backcountry camping was permitted, and most importantly, there was water available, but filtering was highly recommended. What it didn't say was that the water may not be available year-round. The little snippet of a topographical map pictured there in the book with the trail had a clue about that, but we weren't privy to it. The line that indicated where the stream lay was not a continuous blue line, but occasionally it had dashes and dots, meaning not a year-round source of water. Well, this was a bit of an oversight, you might have guessed. We planned our trip. We'd hike in on Saturday, stay overnight, and come back out on Sunday. We packed up and we left Richmond and headed for the hills there early in the morning. And when we got to the ranger station, at the entrance to the Skyline Drive, you may have heard of the Blue Ridge Parkway. It's goes down one half of the Blue Ridge Mountains. The Skyline Drive is the other half. We got to the ranger station there. We learned that there was a complete fire ban on. It was very dry, no fires, not even cook stoves. And without cook stoves, we wouldn't be able to cook the food that we had. So we decided to just go make a day hike out of it and try backpacking some other time. Well, thinking that there would be water along the way, we thought we would be okay with just a small water bottle between the two of us and the filter. We'd go to the stream, filter more water when we were down at the bottom. Well, off we went, and it turned into a very hot day. And our water ran out quickly as we were descending into the bottom. But we didn't worry. We were sure there would be water down there. Well, we got to where the stream was supposed to be. No stream, just a dry bed. And there we were, no water. And a couple more hours of hiking in very humid and hot weather with a 1,600-foot climb to go up. Well, I was a runner back in those days, and I was accustomed to taking long runs on Saturday morning, like 9 miles or more, and so my body was familiar with thirst. But my wife, well, I was worried about her. She wasn't really have the physical fitness for what lay ahead. And as we got to that steep ascent alongside that non-existent waterfall, she was getting pretty tattered, just redder and redder. Fatigue really setting in. We had to stop often and then with no choice, because there's only one way out, and that was out, up and out. We had no choice but to soldier on. And I'm sure she was probably wondering if I had brought her out there to die. It was well into late afternoon before we got back up to the Forestry Service road to where we had to walk maybe almost a mile to get to where the car was parked. We met another hiker along the way who was coming to do things kind of backwards, just wanted to walk down the waterfall trail and come back up. And he remarked on how bad we looked. We looked like things were serious. And he gave us water. Very important thing. You see somebody in that kind of shape, you give them water, and that's what he did. Oddly, I shouldn't say oddly, we never made another attempt at backcountry camping. I don't think my wife trusted my skills enough for that. The marriage lasted another 5 more years. Anyway, thirst. Thirst is dangerous business out there in the wild. It does not take long for dehydration and heat exhaustion to get life-threatening. And I don't think we were that far. We're very far from that point. Maybe another hour or so, I think, of that my wife would have probably passed out. And then it would have been really serious. We should have picked a place we were familiar with for our first attempt at backcountry as a solo couple, set ourselves up for success, but we thought we would be okay. But some trust was destroyed that day because of that experience with thirst, not planning ahead appropriately. Well, looking here at Exodus, we could say it was a bit of an oversight on the part of Moses to lead the people out into the wilderness there, the Sinai Peninsula. Just dry desert, not sandy desert, but granite desert. And to lead them out there without a plan for food and more importantly, water. And one of the biggest gambits we can make in life is to assume that God will provide. Step out in faith to what God wants us to do. We like certainty. We like self-sufficiency. We like security. We admire people who can forge their way through life, never owing anybody anything. We want Frank Sinatra to come sing "I Did It My Way" at our funerals. We like our independence. We like to not have to rely on others. If we're thirsty in life, hungry, or without a roof over our heads, then we presume that we have miscalculated, made some huge errors in judgment, and can only blame ourselves or those whom we thought we could rely on. The ones who got us in this sticky mess. And that was the case with Moses and the Israelites. The sparseness of the wilderness there made it difficult for the Israelites to trust Moses, much less the God who had delivered them from slavery in Egypt. For 400 years they had lived there in Egypt. The God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob over those 400 years had seemingly abandoned them to slavery. Things started out good, but up came a Pharaoh that didn't know Joseph, and they're enslaved. There's no way to know for sure, but it's really likely that the Israelites had forgotten the God of their fathers and given themselves over to Egyptian religion, which was largely utilitarian in nature. If you wanted crops to grow, or you wanted to have children, if you wanted safety on the journey, if you wanted to be a powerful person, there were sacrifices to be made to the particular gods who oversaw such things, and nothing was guaranteed. Just like the Greek gods, the Egyptian gods were really quite capricious, and there's a big soap opera up there in their Egyptian god heaven. These Egyptian gods certainly did not love humans. And these humans were always wanting something from them. We were an annoyance to them. For Moses to come along and claim that the God of their fathers, Yahweh, who spoke to him out of a burning bush, that this God, the God of their fathers, had heard the cries of his people, and for love of them was delivering them from Pharaoh with a mighty hand and leading them to their own land where they would become a great nation. Well, that was a bit to chew on and swallow. And here they find themselves in the middle of nowhere, no water. Absolutely no water. They are about a couple 100,000 in number. I would think that Yahweh, the God of their fathers, was appearing quite capricious to the Israelites by then. Once before they'd already been out of water. They'd been out of food. And here they are out of water again. Moses and his God were looking kind of short-sighted. And so they begin to play the blame game, the complain and blame game. Have you brought us out of Egypt to kill us? Blame the leader. And then came the clincher question. Is the Lord among us or not? Had they not noticed that their God had plagued the Egyptians and delivered them from Pharaoh's army by parting the Red Sea? Did they not remember how they crossed on dry ground, but Pharaoh's army got drowned? They'd been following a whirlwind cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night through the wilderness. God was with them. And yet they couldn't see past the life and death nature of their thirst. Though God was obviously among them, they couldn't see the obvious. And so they complained against God, and especially against Moses. They blamed the leadership. The true question was not whether God was with them. He obviously was. I think it rather boiled down to whether they were with God. Were they with God? So well, here we are, third Sunday of Lent. Thirst. Thirsting for God is the traditional theme for the day. The Israelites were literally thirsty to the point of it being life-threatening. Couldn't go back, they'd die of thirst. Couldn't go forward, they'd die of thirst. But God provided the water, and nobody died. Yet there were other times, before and after this, when some Israelites did die for complaining against God in times of crisis. The complaints were of the nature of, specifically longing to return to Egypt, to slavery, and to the gods of Egypt. They thought that way of life was apparently easier because it didn't require so much actual faith from them. It's easier to believe in a gods who don't care. It's easier to believe that God is capricious and uncaring, unfeeling, uninvolved, unimpassioned for you. It's easier to believe that God has left us here to fend for ourselves than it is to actually believe God is with us, among us, in our midst, that God is actually involved in what is going on in our lives, and that God actually does love us, especially when a crisis is involved. It's hard to believe. Faith gets difficult when the feathers have hit the fan, when a crisis has hit. We live in a culture that is having a crisis of faith at the moment. Now, the people who do polling on matters of faith and religious affiliation, and the national consensus says it too, they're telling us that the institution of Christianity in our culture, the church we grew up in and cherish, has been abandoned by the general population to the point of extinction. Less than 10% of the Canadian population actively participates in the life of a congregation. In these polls, there are two statistical, that's a hard word to say, statistical categories that are kind of catchy but relevant to us. They're the nuns and the duns. The percentage of people with no religious affiliation, who claim no religious affiliation, the nuns, N-O-N-E-S, not N-U-N, the nuns, that percentage is nearing 40% of the population. 40% of our population claim no religious affiliation at all. And many of them do not like the privilege that particularly Christianity has enjoyed in our culture, especially in the areas of tax breaks, moral policing, and political influence. And they really don't like it when they donate to things like hospice. They don't like it when they donate to things like hospice care, and that money gets used to pay a chaplain. Our local hospice no longer has a paid position for a chaplain for this reason. Those are the nuns, 40% of our population, no religious affiliation. And you could say a good part of that actively anti-Christian faith. And then there are the people who are the duns. They're done with the church. They may still have beliefs in or about Jesus, but they got sick of church politics. They got sick of the lack of social compassion that the church so often displays. And so they left. Better things to do than be a part of this club. They are done with the church. They are not coming back. All the while, there is a growing thirst that is at an epidemic level in our culture. I'm not exactly sure I can call it a thirst for God, but it certainly has arisen in conjunction with the demise of Christianity in Canadian culture. This thirst goes by the name of loneliness. If we are to believe the results of recent mental health pollsters, almost 60% of our population is suffering loneliness or had a bout of it in the last year. That's just over half of the people you meet on the street are lonely. Now, in the 5 years prior to COVID, talk about the devastating effects of this thirst. In the 5 years prior to COVID, the world of medicine announced that sitting all day was the new smoking. To sit all day at a desk at a computer is as lethal as smoking nearly a pack a day. But now, in the wake of COVID, people are still sitting, but the studies are showing that loneliness is the new smoking. Lack of meaningful human contact, emotionally, physically, spiritually, and it's lethal. Makes us ill with diseases that kill us. Well, two social events have accompanied the rise of loneliness over the past couple of decades. The introduction of smartphones and social media, and the demise of social institutions such as the church and civic organizations. People don't join groups anymore. They're instead addicted to little devices, and they're lonely. Looking at churches, those senior citizens make up the congregation of most every church in North America. In the past, we've looked at seniors as being the groups that have suffered the most from loneliness. Empty houses, families have moved away and maybe widowed and all that. That was, the seniors are the ones who suffered loneliness. In our congregations today, it's senior citizens who are in our churches, in the last decade or two of their lives, and they're finding living water in the connectedness in congregational participation. But the younger crowd, saying those 55, 60 and younger, most of them are addicted to a device they have no religious affiliation and they have an inexplicable antipathy for anything Christian. And they're lonely. Well, we have to stand firm in trusting that the God who is with us is somehow with them as well. And at the right time, God will call up a Moses, so to speak, who smites that rock from which the living water will flow to the younger generation. Waiting on God to do something. Until then, it is gravely important that we who are imbibing of this living water, that we love our literal neighbors. More than half of the people we encounter in a day are dealing with the effects of loneliness. And when loneliness gets serious, people start getting suspicious of other people and, don't want human contact because, they don't want to get involved because they hurt enough from the loneliness. They don't want to get into relationships and get hurt anymore. It goes like that, and it's vicious. Right now, it is important that we reach out and show care and concern and love for our neighbors because they are thirsty. It's important right now that we be that person on the trail who notices the thirst and gives them a drink. It's like that guy on the trail who gave water to my wife and I back then. It's important we be that person with friendship, with concern, with care to our neighbors. Amen. I'm going to leave you with a nice old tune. I heard the voice of Jesus say, and you folks have a good week, and God bless you. Amen. I came to Jesus and I drank of that life-giving stream. My thirst was quenched, my soul revived, and now I live in Him. I heard the voice of Jesus say, I am this dark world's light. Look unto me, thy morn shall rise, and all thy day be bright. I looked to Jesus, and I found in Him my star, my sun, and in that light of